Hello students, a very warm welcome to this particular session where we're going to deal with your chapter pertaining to inspection, inquiry and investigation. Now it's an early morning and if you're talking about a chapter like this, it becomes important for you to know that this particular chapter is very important and extremely important from the perspective of both your examination and from the perspective of your practical aspect as well. Now, when I talk about why it is important from your examination, obviously you know that it forms part of your curriculum and there could be a possible question in your exam which you're supposed to be answering. But when I talk about what is the practical aspect concerned with this chapter, well, investigation procedures can be initiated against a particular company. Action can be taken against company, directors, officers of the company. And inquiry, inspection of documents, and those documents which have been inspected upon. Inquiry on the points which have been conducted upon can further lead to an investigation as well. And that is what these 23 sections shall be talking or shall be detailing you about what kind of action can be initiated by the government at various levels in respect of inspection, inquiry and investigation against a company, its officers and its directors. Now, very quickly I'll share the screen with you and we proceed on a section by section dissection of this particular topic. I hope the screen is visible to all my dear students here. Now first we talk about section 206. Now this is also the very first section in this chapter number 14. Chapter number 14 talks about the very first concept where it says it has the power to call information, inspect books and conduct inquiries. So inspection and inquiry, both of these terms coming in this first section of this, coming in the word or the heading of this particular section. And there are various authorities and various powers attached to these authorities. And that is what we first see in this particular section. See, when I talk about the registrar, or as we say the ROC, it has the power to call for information. It has the power to inspect the books of accounts, and subsequent to inspecting the books of accounts, it can call for explanations and information. So, the ROC can at any time send a show cause notice, state that in respect of these financial statements of your company, I need to inspect the books of accounts of your company. And on the basis of the books of accounts that I have seen, I need certain more information. I need certain explanations from your side as a company or you as an officer of the company in respect of such and such data. They can go on for an inquiry under section 206. They can have to file subsequent to the order by the seniors, that is the central government, an inspection report. We'll talk about the detailed procedure of the inspection report shortly. Search and seizure can be ordered. And when they're doing all of the above tasks, that is information, calling, inspection of the books of accounts of the company, calling for explanations, ordering for inquiry, submission of inspection report and search and seizure, they shall have all the powers that are otherwise vested in a civil court. And this was about the ROC, the Registrar of Companies. But when we write an exam, we write the word registrar because that is how it is stated in law as well. The very next is my next authority, that is the inspector. Well, we do not really say this inspector is the inspector who stays at the police station. But just like we have an inspector under the income tax segment, we also have an inspector here on the Companies Act segment. And what powers does this inspector have? He can also call for the books of accounts of the company, any books and accounts, books and papers that the company maintains as part of its records. It can again call for an inspection or inquiry. It again has the powers as vested in a civil court. It can again call for an inspection report and submit that inspection report to its senior authorities. can again call for search and seizure of documents. For example, if they've gone for a certain inspection somewhere, or they suddenly raided a particular office somewhere, registered office, I mean, and upon reaching that particular registered office, they've certainly found that there are certain documents which have certain information which can be tampered at a later stage, or they will be used to the detrimental interest of the public or to the stakeholders of that particular company. Then this particular inspector, just like the registrar, has the power to seize those particular documents. And the last power, as I talk about, the inspector shall be to investigate on matters in relation to the company and also to investigate the ownership or the membership of the company. So this inspector has, if I say, one power in excess than what a registrar has. So how could we go about to learn this? We can say, okay, I learn the powers, I understand the powers of the registrar. That is also what the powers of the inspector is. And if my inspector has an additional responsibility and an additional power, then it can investigate in the matters relating to the company and its membership to determine the ownership of the company. Next. Then I have the powers of central government in this particular segment. 1. It can authorize anybody to carry an inspection. It can go ahead and investigate into the affairs. So I have the preliminary data with myself. I have the books of accounts of the company. I have the financial records of the company. I have the books and papers of the company. Now, accordingly, I can go ahead and I can investigate into the affairs of the company, that exactly how is this particular company functional. As central government, they can appoint the inspectors to investigate into affairs of the company, and the submission of the inspection report would come to the central government. Just like in the earlier slide we had a submit inspection report in section 208, this inspection report would flow from the registrar or inspector to the central government to give them an understanding into the affairs of this particular company. Now, when this preliminary investigation has happened, then they can transfer and assign this investigation into the affairs of this company to the SFIO, that is the Serious Fraud Investigation Office. They can appoint the inspector to investigate on the matters of company and its membership. So just like my inspector earlier had powers to investigate, from where is he getting the powers? He will be appointed by the central government to undertake into investigation on the matters pertaining to the company. Say for example, who is the ultimate owner of the company? Is he the real owner of the company, or is he just been made an owner of the company? Say for let me share. We see a lot of news pieces where it has come from the horse's mouth or subsequent to pronouncement of judgments that Mr. X has floated 100 companies and made Mr. Y, Mr. Z, Mr. A, and Mr. B as directors of the company or as members and owners of the company, so as to keep this company and its ownership separate from himself. So, inspector can be appointed to investigate into real ownership of these particular companies. And where does he get his appointment from? He gets his appointment from the central government. And any action subsequent to the report of the inspector, the central government has power that it can initiate action subsequent to receipt of this inspector's report in respect of this particular company. So, I'll quickly go back to my first slide here. We have the powers of the registrar. So, all the powers that are vested in the registrar also vest in the inspector. An additional power with the inspector to investigate on the matters pertaining to the company and membership. And before I move on to the next, that is the powers of the central government again, it is pertinent that you guys understand that inspection report has to go to the central government. The central government shall appoint the inspector to investigate on matters. It has the power to establish the SFIO. It can assign the investigation to the SFIO. Now, if it is assignment, means there was already certain other authority. That earlier authority was the inspector. So, inspector was taking care of the inspection. This inspection investigation has now been assigned to the SFIO, that is the Ceded Fraud Investigation Office. So, inspection further leading to the investigation. Then there are two more authorities which have certain powers under this particular chapter. My regional director can also appoint an inspector if it is so required. And lastly, a tribunal. Generally, for certain matters, you can always go back to the tribunal, state that there is an adverse effect of certain actions being taken by the company, and therefore there is an order required for investigation. Then the company may dispose of the property for freezing of assets of company on inquiry or investigation, and for imposing restrictions upon transfer of securities. Now, if I have to give you an example pertaining to my first point here, pass an order for investigation into company's actions. Let me give you a very small practical example on this case. Say there is a company X X Limited. This X Limited has two directors right now, X and Y. It also has an X director, EX director, prior director, who was removed illegally. So he comes and states, I have been removed illegally. This company is not adhering to the laws that it should be following. It is otherwise functioning or operating in a manner which is detrimental to the interest of the public, which is detrimental to the interest of the stakeholders of the company, and therefore there is a requirement that you get into investigation. It can put up an application before the tribunal, and the tribunal, if it deems fit, it can pass an order accordingly for investigation into the company's affairs. Now, once this investigation is initiated, there may be a requirement to freeze the assets of the company on inquiry and investigation under 221. And what will happen? They're conducting an inquiry, they're conducting an investigation, and suddenly they realize that they may part away with, say, certain land and building of the company and siphon away the money. So there could be a restraining order that no alienation of assets shall take place in respect of the company, and therefore the assets and should be freezed then and there, and a status quo should be maintained in respect of such assets. And since I use the word status quo, I'll quickly tell you that when I mean status quo, then I also mean the fact that the assets shall remain in the manner as they are, and they cannot change any form, they cannot be alienated, they cannot be parted by the company in any manner. Now, before I move to the next, if you have any queries, students, use the portal that is there and share your queries live, so that as we are progressing with this particular chapter today, we can easily clarify your doubts at the same time and no doubts remain unanswered. Now, I come to the next question. And my next question, my dear students, my next topic, my dear students here, deals with power of the registrar to call for information, explanation, or documents. This is all the very first power that we discussed in respect of this particular authority. 2061, my registrar already has certain documents. It scrutinizes the said documents filed by the company or on any information which has been received by him. So, for example, if my company has filed the AOC4 form in respect of the financial statements of the company, or if in short I say my AOC4 has been filed in respect of the balance sheet, the profit and loss of the company, and the notes to accounts, along with director's report and auditor's report. So, earlier, this form was a straight-through process form that as you file, it will get approved in the same manner and no resubmission can be asked or no further information or explanation in respect of this form can be asked by the authorities. But slowly and since last year onwards, students, what started happening was that AOC 4 form ceased to be an STP mode form, that is a straight through process mode form. And what happened subsequent? The ROC would go through the data, or the officers who were sitting there at the ROC offices, they could go through the data that has been filled up in the AOC 4 form specifically of that particular company. And what happens subsequent? They can ask you that you need to resubmit this form subsequent to such amendments which are as per the financial data submitted by you, or this data does not match with the forms earlier filed by the company, or this data does not match or is not in consonance with the master data of the company. And so being the case, they can direct you for subsequent refiling of the said form or resubmission of the said form. So they already have a document which has been filed by a company. They are scrutinizing or going through that particular document. And once they are going through the document, they are of the opinion that further information, explanation of further documents should be put up by the company. So they can give you a written notice, they can give you a direction to either furnish such information, explanation, or produce such documents. Second, this was a limited scope wherein it's only related to resubmission in a particular case. There could also be a situation where this resubmission was just in a manner to inform you or to let you know that, okay, this is how they're receiving documents from a company, and this is how documents are getting filed by a company. There could also be a situation, my dear, that they have received the documentation in prior. After receiving the documentation, at a subsequent date, my company comes up and it files a subsequent document. Now, this is a subsequent documentation which comes at a later date. And when it comes at a later date, my ROC at that point of time, during the process of further information, it requires certain more information on a particular document, on a particular classification, maybe even CSR for that reason, and then puts up a notice to the company stating, a show cause notice to the company stating that certain more documents on its directors. That's where my registrar has the power to call for information, explanation on documents, on information already received by him, or documents already filed by the company. Now, as I state this, I have a few questions here. Good morning, Sri Lekha. Good morning, Himangi. Ambika here asks a question. Ma'am, what are the powers vested in civil code? Ambika will be taking up that during the course of the discussion today. But I would definitely take care that we take it up at length since you already have a question shared. What is search and seizure of documents? Sri Lekha. Okay. Sri Lekha, if I have to maybe brief you about search and seizure. See, if I have to state it in this manner, I am from the ROC. You're a company. I have certain documents filed with myself. And or I may have received certain information from an external party or an internal party to your company who's been a whistleblower. There is certain activity undertaken by the company which is detrimental to the interest of the public, which is detrimental to the interest of the stakeholders, which is detrimental to the interest of the company also. It could be either of these. I receive a direction from either the RD, or I receive a direction from the central government, or I'm a part of the SFIO team and I go to that particular place for a search. I conduct a search, I go through the documents of the company which are maintained by the company in the registered office. Now these could be the registers and records, the statutory records which the company has to maintain at the registered office of the company. I go through these particular documents, I come to know about how this company operates, I come to know whether or not this company is maintaining the registered office, I come to know whether or not the statutory records are there. I come to know what are the assets of the company. I see a lot of cash over there, which does not correlate with the business of the company, and not even the cash balance as in the books of the company. I find that there are certain documents which, if I leave back here at this particular office or registered office of the company, they may part away with the documents, they may part away with the papers, they may part away with the assets of that particular company, and that is not in the best interest to leave those documents there. So they will give it in writing to the company that we are taking such and such documents from a registered office, and they shall be in our custody and they are seized by us. That is, we are taking that particular documentation from here. Now here, if I talk about income tax, if I have to draw a parallel between income tax here, income tax also there is a provision where they say we can take extracts of those particular documents. But here they don't talk about taking extracts of the particular documents, they talk about seizure. So they will seize the entire set of documents only which they want and they will take away. That is one contrast that we have in comparison to what is there under the income tax provision. And I think that should satisfy a question pertaining to seizure of documentation. Now with that, I move on to my next slide. Duty of the company and its officers. Now, when all of this is happening, there is a notice which has been received by the company. There is a notice which has been received by the current officers of the company, because here, when there is a notice received, there is a duty cast on the company, its officers, and any past officers if there is a notice pertaining to prior period. Say, I have received a notice on, say, today's date, that is 27/09/2020. This notice pertains to the period, say 01/04/2017 to 31/03/2018. Now, and on today's date, I have directors Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C. But on this particular financial year, my directors were Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. D, and Mr. E. There is a change of directors of that particular time period for which I have got my notice, and at today's date, when I have received the notice. The receipt of notice, I have different set of directors. Data pertaining to the notice for which I have been asked, then the directors were different. So there would be a duty cast on today's directors also. Why? Because they have received the notice, and the duty is cast on the earlier directors, the past officers of the company. Why? Because they were the officers of the company for which a notice has been received, and they would have information and explanation pertaining to the records of that particular year. So it becomes a duty of the company. It becomes duty of the officers concerned to furnish the information or explanation to the best of their knowledge and power, and to produce documents. Say the ROC says I want XYZ documents, to produce such XYZ documents to the registrar within the time specified or extended. So they may give me a time of 15 days. I may go and say that, okay, there is a change in directorship of the company. There were 2 earlier directors, and this director is new, who's not pertaining to that particular period. We need some more time. They may further extend some time, say by 7 days or 15 days or 10 days as they deem fit. And accordingly, in that particular time period, my directors and the current officers of the company are supposed to furnish the information. This was about furnishing of the information. The past officers of the company, that is in the instant case, Mr. D and Mr. E. they can be called upon by the registrar. And why will they call? Well, basis the documents that have been submitted, basis the information and explanation that have been submitted by the company, they can be required to furnish information or explanation. And if they are being called, and today when they are not the current officers of the company, but they're the past officers of the company, a notice has to be served on them in writing, which is separate from the notice which has been served upon the company. So there is one, a duty cast on the company, a duty cast on the current officers of the company, and there is two, duty cast on the past officers of the company who were the officers of the company in respect of the period for which the notice has been served. In the instant example, 0104-2017, 31st of March 2018, since that is the captioned time period in respect of the notice. Now, additional written notice by the registrar. Now, what is additional written notice? Now, when I say additional written notice, then there is already one notice which has been received from the side of the registrar. So, one notice already received. Thank you, Sri Lakha, for your thanks back. So, there is one written notice which has already been received. There is a second written notice and an additional written notice which has been served by the registrar to the company. So, here, my registrar may buy another written notice. Remember the word another in 206 subsection 3. It can call on the company, so this is on the company, to produce for his inspection such further books of accounts, books of papers and explanations as he may require at such place and such time. So this is a requirement that I am summoning the company because they are requiring to be produced at place and time. Summon to the company to come at the ROC office or any other office so designated or delegated. And at the time when they are coming, the company has to appear through its authorized representative, through the directors, through the officers. They have to get along any such documents, any such papers, explanations, maybe some records that the company otherwise maintains. For example, if there's something on my financial statements, I may be maintaining my records in an ERP, I may be maintaining my records in a normal books of accounts manner, the way it functions manually. Or I may have certain records in respect of the assets that the company has. It may be related to some IPR that the company has. It may be related to certain transactions, contracts or arrangements that the company may have. So the registrar may ask me to produce any of these documents, any of these papers along with explanation. And this may be in the form of an additional notice, written notice. This has to be written. No oral requests can be made. If no information explanation is furnished within the time specified, so if they give me 10 days, I have not furnished any information, or if the registrar on an examination is of the opinion that the information is inadequate, so what I have supplied is inadequate and there should have been more supplementation or more details or documentation pertaining to the document, or the registrar is satisfied on scrutiny that the documents do not disclose a full and fair statement or they give an unsatisfactory state of affairs of the company, it may state so and record his reasons in writing. And then they can further send another notice to the company seeking more additional information. That is about section 206, subsection 3. That is a written notice by the registrar of companies, which is an additional notice in writing. So the word itself, the heading itself here, 2063 already mentions the word written notice. You cannot be called upon by the registrar of companies office orally directing you to produce certain documents. Now, before I move to the next subsection, if there are any queries, please share back on the portal so that the same can be taken up at the same time. Excuse me. Next, students, we come to the next subsection, inquiry by the registrar. So, we've all seen that this notice shall be in writing format, again restated in the next subsection. This company has been called upon in writing to provide certain information, to provide certain explanations, and certain time has been granted to this particular company to submit such documentation. There will be a reasonable opportunity of being heard in respect of the company. So it cannot be that I submit certain documents and the ROC will only go through the documents and pass an order. No, they will have to give me a reasonable opportunity if it's an inquiry. If they're going into the process of an inquiry, they will have to give me an opportunity to present my side of the case, to present what I'm stating, to allow me to make certain additional submissions in respect of the documents I'm submitting to them as desired by them. So, if the registrar is satisfied that information available with him or what is furnished to him on a representation which is made to him by a person that the business is being carried in a fraudulent or unlawful purpose, just like I stated at the starting that, okay, why would an inquiry be happening where it is detrimental to the interest of certain entities? That could be another manner that you write. Detrimental, the interest of the company / stakeholders then it is carried out in a fraudulent purpose, unlawful purpose, or the grievances of the investors are not being addressed. Then in that case, the company will go on for an inquiry. It will give you a reasonable opportunity of being heard, and then only pass a subsequent order. Now, what would this order carry? This order will not just carry that, okay, we are costing upon you this particular requirement of filing such and such documentation and details and information with the company, but also the fact that I am calling upon you for so and so allegations. So the allegations or which have been cast against the company, its directors, its officers, have to be stated in the notice. They have to be spelled out in this particular notice. With that, we have two more questions. One from Vamsi Sai. He says, ma'am, can registrar call for additional information if he hasn't received any info in the first place? Yes, of course. If he hasn't received any information in the first place, so generally they will say, okay, we will give you another 10 days reasonable time period or 7 days reasonable time period, so that a reasonable opportunity of being heard has been offered to the other party to present his side on the allegations cast upon him or placed upon him. So, if in the first place you haven't received, means you haven't received. So, you're asking information only, you're not asking for additional information. Next, Ambika asks a question. Now, if section 2062 in that period there was alternate director, then who is liable to furnish information? Original director or alternate? Wow. I'll go back to 2062. Now, let me ask you a question, Ambika. If there was an alternate director in a particular company at a particular time period, means my original director, as to whose alternate this particular director was appointed. Say, let's take this one only. There is Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. D, and Mr. E. So for more than 3 months, during this particular year of 1st April 2017 to 31st March 18, for a period exceeding 3 months, say 4 months, Mr. B was not in town and Mr. P was appointed as an alternate. Okay, now when Mr. P was appointed as an alternate to Mr. B for that particular time period when Mr. B was not in city or was not available to attend the board meetings, was not in the country, he was abroad. He was not there to undertake the decision making pertaining to that particular company. Notices would have gone to Mr. B as well as Mr. P. Why? Because Mr. P is an alternate director who's on the board of the company at that point of time. Now, Mr. P is there as a part of the board, so he would have been a part of the decision making of that particular company. So, in case if there is any information which pertains only to, say, the 4 months time period, could be like July, August, September, October, then for this time period, Mr. P can be called upon by the ROC to make his submissions, and he can always say that I was only a part of this particular company for these 4 months, and therefore any data pertaining to these 4 months can only be stated by me. Now quickly you can make a note of this particular example, students, since this came up as a question from the side of a student, your fellow student. So I'll give you around like a minute's time to note this down and come back with further questions before we move forward. So all of you, can I expect you quickly inform me back on the chat portal if you've gone through this particular example that has been further extended subsequent to a question received from your friend back there in Mumbai. And only if you tell me that you've gone through it and you've noted it down, would I move forward to the next segment of this particular chapter. Chalo. There is one message which has been received by me stating, ma'am, let's move forward, please. So let me take it as the word of my dear students and I move forward to the next segment here. Now, we were on inquiry by the registrar when we talked about that, okay, certain information has been supplied, this company is working in a fraudulent manner, this company is working in an unlawful manner. There are certain activities which are detrimental to the interest of the company, to the stakeholders, and the allegations have been stated out in writing. Okay, so this is what you've done. The central government can direct the registrar or an inspector to carry out an inquiry. So it can do it suo moto. This inquiry, students, see the word inquiry is there. If it is satisfied that the circumstances so warrant, then it may direct the registrar or an inspector to carry out the inquiry. So this can be suo moto by CG, that is central government, or can be delegated to registrar or inspector. So this is one thing that we need to understand, that since we have studied it as powers available to registrar, at power available to inspector, power available to central government in respect of inquiry. So this inquiry by the registrar is also upon direction by the central government, and the central government should be satisfied that the registrar or the inspector should do it, or else the central government can directly go ahead through its persons, through its officers, and conduct an inquiry in respect of that particular company. So I have two more students here who just informed me that yes, they have done the notings. Very good. We're at the pace and we are doing it live with each other together here. Now, coming to the last point in this particular subsection. If the business of the company is carried on for a fraudulent purpose or an unlawful purpose, every officer of the company who is in default shall be punishable for fraud in the manner as provided in section 447. Now, what is the concept of officer in default? I'll give you 30 seconds. Fly back on the chat board. Let me see how many of you can tell me who exactly is an officer in default. And subsequent to that, I will come back to you and state who is an officer in default and what is the punishment as provided in section 447. So very quickly, students, use the chat portal and share it with me right now that what exactly is officer in default. Let's see what's your understanding. Come on, this is a very simple concept. Okay, under section 2, clause 60, KMP and full-time director. Okay, that's what comes from Ambika. Ambika is here with us from Mumbai. Ambika stated this. Let me wait for a few more of you. Quickly. Please understand the fact that you guys can do it and you understand the concept. It is important that you understand what it means at the right time. And that is also what is important during examination. You just knowing the law or you just understanding the law is not important. Also reproducing the correct aspect of law and the correct interpretation of law during examination is important. And that is why time and again during the course of my lectures, I will be asking you to explain to me or to write back to me a few understanding on a few aspects during the course of the lecture so that you get into the habit of not just understanding but also stating it. So there's another one, Anushri Shah. Anushri writes, officer who has been guilty of any provisions of Companies Act. All right. Anyone else? There's another one stating under section 2 clause 60 that the person's only written 2 clause 60. So I think you're all coming back to the same kind of an understanding of officer in default. See, many places under Companies Act, you would have the word officer, you would have the word officer in default, you would have the word KMP, you would have the word directors of the company, officers of the company. So it's important that you understand there's a differentiation between all of these. Officers of the company and officers of the company who are in respect of the company. But officer in default could be any whole-time director, any KMP of the company, any other director of the company who can be made liable for penalty and punishment in respect of non-compliance / violation of provisions. Since I'm talking in respect of Companies Act, so I'll write off Companies Act 2013. This was about officer in default, if I have to make an understanding of who this officer in default is. So I have three more people here. Ranjit Mishra from Delhi, officer who shall be responsible for default in company. Kamlesh Joshi, who writes any director or officer or person as authorized by the company who fails to comply with provisions of the Companies Act is treated as officer in default. Okay. You can designate an officer in default so that all your directors do not have to land up in that particular problem for non-compliance or violation. Good. Shatrudhan Kumar Singh, he states, in case particular 4 months alternate. Okay, that's another point pertaining to an earlier example that we were dealing. So Shatrudhan, I'll come back to your question shortly. Ambika says an enter area every director. So in case if you don't have any particular director designated, then all directors of your company. Specifically, since they talk about the word whole-time director in KMT, we would first stress upon whole-time directors of the company. So in case if my company has independent directors, they would be the last persons to be called up to resort in respect of such questioning. Why? Because the whole-time director has been given a preference, so they want directors in active work mode in that particular company, who are active in that particular company in terms of their tasks, or who has the responsibility of running the show of the company, to be first called as officers in default and designated as such. So I come back to this particular thing that has come from Shatrudhan. Shatrudhan, you're talking about this particular place where we were talking about. In case of particular 4 months alternate director, that is Mr. P in this particular case, makes any default in business transaction by the alternate director, who will be penalized? The original director may be informed of the default or not. Okay. So do you mean to say that there was a business transaction which is non-compliant in nature? There is a default which has happened in respect of a business transaction. At that point of time, my directors were Mr. A, my original director, Mr. D, my other director, Mr. E, my other director, and Mr. P, my alternate director. So Mr. B was not there. Do you mean to say that in case if Mr. B was subsequently informed of this transaction, who shall be called up for the inquiry, or who shall be penalized? Well, in case of such transactions, where any such transaction, any business transaction, which is not in the interest of the company, which is fraudulent in nature, has happened, and you have to cast responsibility on the directors of the company, then Mr. B was not in the country at that point of time. Mr. B was not privy to the details of the contract or the business transaction. Mr. B was not aware of how this transaction has taken place because he was not sitting as a member of the board at the time of that board meeting. So he will not be held liable. Mr. P shall be called upon for certain information, and Mr. B can be called up as part of the board, but he cannot be liability cannot be cast upon Mr. P for this particular transaction. I hope that clarifies your question, Shatrudhan Kumar Singh from Mumbai. New Delhi. Shatrudhan is from Delhi. No further questions, my students, here as of now. So I would move to my next segment. Okay, I'll wait for this because again, there's a new question which has got created out of an existing example, and you guys may note it down for ease at your purpose. Okay, so far so good. No more further questions as of now in respect of the topics that we have just covered. So maybe in another 10 seconds time, I would shift on my slide and move to the next segment of this particular chapter. Now, our next segment here deals with section 206 subsection 5, where we talk about inspection by the central government. So in case if the central government has any specific circumstances in its knowledge which make it satisfied to believe that okay, there is warranted an inspection of the books of accounts of the company, the books and papers of the company, the books and records of the company, then they may appoint an inspector for that particular purpose, and the inspector may carry out an inspection. So earlier, 206 subsection 4, they were talking about an inquiry by the central government, where they may direct, if they so desire, an ROC, a registrar of companies, or the inspector for such inspection. Here, 206 subsection 5, if the circumstances so warrant, then they can direct inspection by an inspector. So 2064, they can direct it to the ROC or the inspector. 2065, they can direct it to an inspector to inspect. Then 2064 was what? It was your inquiry, right? And 2065 is your inspection. So that is another difference that you need to understand on 2064 and 2065. Next, 2066. So in case if the circumstances further warrant. So first is I have seen the circumstances. I want an inquiry. I'm part of the central government. I say inquiry is fine. I either assign someone from my office or delegate to the ROC, or I delegate to some inspector. They go ahead, carry out an inquiry. 2064. (2065). I have certain books and papers, books records, and on the basis of this, or certain information which warrants that there should be an inspection. CG delegates to an inspector. Now comes my 2066. There is a general or specific order. It can authorize any statutory authority. And who is a statutory authority? Could be ROC, could be RD, that is regional director, could be inspector as well, or any other stat authority to carry out an inspection of the books of accounts of the company or certain classes of companies. This is the differentiation between comparison if you have to see under subsection 4, subsection 5, and subsection 6 of section 206. Quickly, let me see. Okay, no more further doubts. I'll move to the next segment. Failure to furnish information. So, in case if there's been an inquiry, if there's been an inspection, and certain information was called to from the company, from the directors, from the officers, from the past officers of the company, and it was not made available. And the company and every officer of the company who is in default. So again, I come to the concept of company plus officer in default shall be punishable with fine, which may extend to 1 lakh rupees, so maximum 1 lakh as fine. And in the case of a continuing failure, means I had given them a time limit. They did not furnish the documents to me within that time limit. Okay. So I imposed certain fine on it. Fine on that particular company, a fine on that particular officer. Then I gave them some final date. They did not appear by that date. They did not give me the information by that date. And I keep imposing a 500 fine per day after the first such occasion during the time period when such failure continues. If it continues for the next 50 days, then I multiply it by 50, I say 25,000. If it continues for 30 days, I add some 15,000 and I say, okay, 1 lakh plus 15,000. You're welcome, Shatrudhan, for confirming that the topic or the concept in respect of that question that you shared on alternate director is cleared. Once students use the platform, ask your questions. Now I come to section 207, conduct of inspection and inquiry by a company, in respect of a company. I was about to say by a company. Why? Because generally that is what the habit all of us. It's like, okay, information to be supplied by the company, documents to be submitted by the company, but here it is in respect of the company and on the company. So till now we were talking about who has the power, what is the power in respect of inspection and inquiry. Now we're talking about conduction of such inspection or inquiry. Now, when we're talking about conduction of inspection or inquiry, now what is the duty of the directors or officers or employees of the company? So if there is a notice which has been received by the directors, the officers or the employees of the company, which calls for the books of accounts, that can be asked under this section, and other books and papers or statutory records maintained by the company, and this notice is under section 206, you've been asked to produce all such documents to the registrar or the inspector, 2064, to furnish him with such statements, information, explanations as they require. Say, for example, they've gone through the documents. After that, they ask you certain more information, certain more explanations, certain more clarifications, and to render all assistance to the registrar in connection with such inspection. So if you have been cast upon any such duty to provide such information, to provide such documents, and subsequently if they require any other assistance from you in respect of such inspection, the directors, the officers and the employees of the company are cast upon with the duty that they have to provide the documents, furnish the statements and render the assistance. Next. Powers of the registrar or the inspector, 207 subsection 2, 207 subsection 3. So when this particular inspection is being carried out by the registrar or the inspector, during the course of such inspection and inquiry, they may be asked or they may be told that copies of books of accounts should be produced or submitted. Copies of books and papers should be submitted, or the registrar or the inspector, they have the power to place marks of identification in such books in token of the inspection having been made. Okay, so I think this is a relevant document in this particular entire submission or this entire set of documents that they have. So I will maybe flag it up. I may write something. I may put my initials and mark that particular page so that I have created a mark of identification that I have gone through this document and it seems relevant. So, copies of books of accounts and other books of papers, place or cause to be placed marks of identification. So, the registrar or the inspector during the course of such inspection inquiry has these two powers as well. Quickly, I move on to my next point here. They shall have the powers as a vested in a civil court. So I had a question here from, who is this? Ambika from Mumbai. So Ambika had this particular question. So, okay, what are these powers which are vested in the registrar or the inspector as they are vested in civil court under CPC? That's Code of Civil Procedure 1908. So here I come, Ambika, to your question. They can ask for discovery and production of books of accounts of the company at any place and time which has been stated by the registrar or the inspector. They can summon the attendance of the persons. They can examine them or not. So they can state that, okay, you have to come along with these particular documents, you have to be present in front of myself at my office or any other place, which is otherwise of the government. They can examine them on oath, that is, they can ask them to file an affidavit in respect of certain information that is required. They can inspect any books, registers, and other documents of the company at any particular place. So these three are the powers which are vested in the registrar or the inspector while trying the suit. So in case if there is a contravention of section 207, the above subsections, then in that case, director or the officer of the company who disobeys the direction, they shall be punishable with imprisonment and with fines. So imprisonment can extend up to 1 year, fine from 25,000 rupees to a lakh, and subsequently, if director or officer of the company has been convicted for an offence under this section, they will seem deemed to have been vacated his office. And this vacation, if I talk about vacation, I will come to section 167 of Companies Act. So if it says, now my dear students, section 167 states that if there is a conviction in respect of non-compliance or violation of any of the provisions of Companies Act 2013 or any other Companies Act, say during the 1956 era and that conviction still continues, then the director shall be deemed to have vacated his office. That is, he will cease to be a director on the board of that particular company and he cannot continue as a director. Why? Because he is already convicted for non-compliance, convicted for violation, convicted for contravention of the provisions of the Act. No further questions as of now, so I'm moving forward. Now there is already an inspection made. There is already a documentation made. There is already documents collected, evidence is collected. Someone has been called to examine on oath. Affidavits have been taken. Person has been asked to be present before the respective authority, that is the registrar or the inspector. Then comes a report on this inspection which has been made. And after this inspection, they will submit this report. The registrar or the inspector shall submit this report in writing to the central government, and along with it, it will also submit a copy of the documents which they have procured from that particular company, from its officers, from its directors, which necessitate and compel them to write. The documents that compel them to write, the documents that make them write such an inspection report shall be annexed to the report. And a recommendation can also go from the side of the registrar or the inspector whether or not a further investigation into the affairs of the company is required or not. Either my report could be that, okay, this is the final status of the inspection that was undertaken in respect of this particular company and no further action is required, or else whether more investigation, much more investigation or further investigation is required into the affairs of the company, along with the reasons for either of the cases. Whether more investigation is required or whether further investigation is not required. At this point, I have a question from Ambika. Ambika states, ma'am, attendance should be in person and can be through representative. See, if it is a summon, you'll have to appear in person. Otherwise, you may appear with an authorized representative. It would depend on what the document is natured or termed as, just requiring attendance. Now I come to section 209, search and seizure. So we were talking about seizure earlier as well, and there was a question which had come from Srilekha, Devi Srilekha from Kerala. So Srilekha, your question was pertaining to, so what exactly is search and seizure of documents? We would deal with it now under this particular subsection of section 209. So 2091 deals with this particular concept. Now, I have received certain information. I have certain documents in my possession. And therefore, being the registrar or the inspector, I have reasonable grounds to believe. I have reasonable grounds to believe that the books and papers of the company or relating to the KMP or relating to any director or relating to any auditor or relating to any company secretary in practice if the company does not have a CS are likely to be destroyed, mutilated, altered, falsified or secreted. That is, they can be destroyed, you cannot find them, mutilated, they can be altered or put up in a defaced manner, maybe torn, altered, changes could be made, falsified, changes could be made in another manner so as to give them a wrong picture, or they could be secreted, they could be parted away with it. Then in that case, they can be seized by the registrar or the inspector in respect of that particular data or information or inquiry or inspection. So if I am the inspector, I am conducting this particular seizure, I should have a reasonable ground to believe that these documents, these books and papers can be by any of the above destroyed, mutilated, altered, falsified or secreted. And I can then seize these documents in my possession. And when I seize, I will have to give it in writing to the company that these documents have been seized by me as an authority for this particular inspection or inquiry. I cannot just anyways take it. I will have to inform them and give it to them in writing. Now, how will I do it? I will first have to obtain an order from a special court. I cannot, when I'm sitting with them, say that, okay, I am keeping a copy of these documents. No, I will first have to obtain an order from the special court and then I will seize the documents and papers. Now, will I, so for example, if I take all of these documents with myself, how will the company function? I can ask the company, I can allow the company that, okay, since you need to carry on your daily activities also, you can take copies of such documents, you can take extracts of such documents at your cost. So you are involved in an inquiry, you are involved in an investigation, you are involved in an inspection, and your documents are vesting with me right now. So what you can do is, you can take copies of these, but the cost to be borne is to be borne by you because your activity is under suspicion. Your act is under suspicion. Your business transaction is under suspicion. Next, what is a period of seizure? They can be seized for a period of 180 days, and in case if the time period exceeds 180 days, then subsequent orders have to be taken from the authorities and further documentation in writing has to be provided to the company. So I will have to return it within a period of 180 days after such seizure to the company whose custody such books of papers were seized. These books and papers may be further called upon for a period of 180 days if they are needed again. So 180 plus 180. 180 with an initial order, subsequent 180 with another order or direction on the company. Now, myself as registrar and inspector, before I return back these documents after 180 days, I have the right that I can take copies, I can take extracts, I can place identification marks on them to deal with the same in any manner as I consider necessary for my inquiry, inspection, investigation. And the company cannot preclude me from carrying out any such act. Provisions of CPC shall apply in respect of search and seizure. Now I come to section 209, that is investigation. So till now we were talking about inquiry and inspection. Now we come to the provisions pertaining to investigation. Any questions, students, so far? Before I move on to 210, let me give you a 30 seconds breather so that you can state your questions if any. Okay, there's one. Can officer seize the books of accounts of subsidiary company and as officer also in case involved in defaults? When you should have a direction. If you have a direction to seize certain documents like these pertaining to a subsidiary company, if this is involved in the common default, and once you're going with that respective order to seize the documents, then yes, you can seize the documents of that particular subsidiary company as well. Otherwise, you cannot. There should be a specific direction, a specific order which is casting upon you that you can take such copies. This was again Shatrughan from Delhi. Okay, now I begin with section 210. The investigation in the opinion of the central government. So till now, if my central government had reasons to believe, if my central government had certain information, if my central government had access to certain documents, where they thought, okay, let's go ahead with an inquiry, let's go ahead with an inspection and just understand what is the matter. And if required, let's summon them, let's ask them to come, let's ask them to produce documents. It becomes more grave when it comes to investigation because now you have concrete reasons to understand that there is something which is necessarily and definitely not in the best interest of the company, of the stakeholders, and therefore require more deeper a check. So it is necessary to investigate into the affairs of the company. They've received a report of the registrar or the inspector who was so appointed. Then there is a special resolution which has been passed by the company. The affairs of the company ought to be investigated. So you have maybe created an allegation or received an allegation in respect of the company on any other director of the company, any officer of the company, that there are certain actions by them which need an investigation, and the company has passed a special resolution. And since it's a special resolution, it would have come from the general meeting. So the members may have passed a resolution in the general meeting and sent it across to the central government. Or if central government feels in public interest it is required to order an investigation into the affairs of the company, it can call for an investigation of the affairs of a particular company. So 3 reasons. 1, either there is a receipt of a report of the registrar or inspector which further warrants that there should be an investigation. 2, in the general meeting of members, there is a resolution, special resolution passed that the affairs of the company ought to be investigated. And 3rd, in public interest, there is a requirement that investigation has to be undertaken in respect of the affairs of the company. Then the central government, if it deems so fit, shall call investigation into the affairs of the company. Now, very quickly, since there is the word special resolution in this particular section 210, let me pose my next question. It's a very simple one. What do you mean by special resolution? When you get a case study to talk about in this particular chapter or any other chapter where you have the word special resolution written, it's important to understand what is a special resolution. Okay, or maybe take it like that. Differentiate between ordinary resolution. How will you differentiate between ordinary resolution and special resolution? Quickly. How will you differentiate between ordinary resolution and special resolution? Okay, there is Sri Lekha. She says, ma'am, can we have a break for 5 minutes? Sri Lekha, can we have it at 8:30 so that everybody is prepared? And I'll let you know right now itself, 15 minutes from now, we have a break. That you also get reasonable time or a gap. So 8:30 would be the break. Let me state it like that. There's another one from Rabi S. Pandey. Madam, kindly let us know how many times the seizure period can be extended. They've already written it once 180 and subsequent 180. So I would rather not talk about another 180. Law talks about first extension, first time seizure, original seizure, then a further extension. So 180 plus 180. No further extensions is being talked about as per law as of now. I hope, Ravi, your doubt stands clarified. Sri Lekha, you're fine with it? Great. You have no option, my dear. Ambika from Mumbai, 3 votes in favor of 4 against. I would still need to understand what you mean by this, Ambika. Ordinary resolution versus special resolution. Let me refresh this. Okay, so I have her answer revised. I have a few more answers as well. Well, absolutely correct. So when we talk about an ordinary resolution, we need an ordinary majority to pass out a resolution or to taken it as confirmed or affirmed, and the resolution to so have been passed in the general meeting. So more than 50% to be in favor. Here, in short, if I say greater than 75%, should have passed this particular resolution. Okay, let me ask you another question. Ordinary business versus special business. Some areas where students definitely get confused. Not directly linked to this particular topic, but important from the perspective of your examination to understand and implement in a case study. Okay. So far, the students have still come up with ordinary resolution and special resolution. Quickly shift up your focus and come back to ordinary business vis-a-vis special business so that I can move to the next topic subsequently. I would want your understanding because slowly and gradually we may have topics pertaining to this as well in our curriculum, not just in today's lecture but in subsequents as well, maybe tomorrow. Okay. Few answers that have flown up to me. Ordinary business, approving financial statements, appointment of directors, appointment of auditors, declaration of dividend. Other than these matters discussed are of special business. Absolutely correct, Anushri Shah from Mumbai. And she makes it easier for me with the correct answer to enable me to move forward. Thank you so much. So we have only 4 ordinary businesses, guys. It does not mean that if there is an ordinary business, there has to be an ordinary resolution, or a special business shall only have a special resolution. So ordinary business, ordinary resolution is fine. But a special business could be an ordinary resolution, or a special business could be a special resolution also, which is being required. You may have a special business which may require more than 50% to give a consent, or you may have a special business which may have more than 75% required to give their consent. Next, investigation on the order by a court or tribunal. So maybe there is a section 241 to 42 matter. If I talk about oppression and mismanagement, and either the shareholders or the directors of the company would have approached the court or the tribunal that this is the state of the affairs of this particular company and they are running the company or they are managing the affairs of the company, which necessitates that the court or the tribunal, during the process of such proceedings, cause an investigation to be called in respect of such company. So at that point of time, if the central government so deems it fit, it can order an investigation into the affairs of the companies. One, there should be an order passed by a court or tribunal. Then central government shall order an investigation. Next, appointment of inspector. Central government has the power to appoint one or more persons as inspectors and who shall investigate and report. So who has the power to appoint an inspector? Central government. And since they are appointing, so they will receive the submission of the report as well. Now, in case if there is an investigation happening, so there is a security maximum of rupees 25,000 to cover up the cost and expenses of investigation. So that has to be given by the applicant. So if as an applicant, before the court or the tribunal, I have approved that okay, I am an ex-director of this particular company, or I am a shareholder of this particular company, and I state to the court that the affairs of the company are being caused in a fraudulent manner. You need to order an investigation, and I submit the documents pertaining to it. The court is satisfied from my documents. It orders an inspection. So, before appointing an inspector, it will say that since you have called for an inspection of this particular company, you have brought up this particular matter as a petitioner or as an applicant, so you have to give me a security so that the cost of the investigation, the expenses of investigation that my people are going from my central government office as an inspector or registrar, they are doing all this inspection, investigation. So, to and fro, their time cost, I would require you to cause up this particular maximum security, because it's not exceeding 25,000, so that the cost is covered. Now, if the investigation at a particular date, when the report comes out, this results in prosecution of the directors, the prosecution of the officers of the company. Why? Because the facts or circumstances which were given to the registrar or to the central government were true, or the facts or the circumstances which were produced before the tribunal or the court were turned out to be true subsequent to the report. Then in that case, what whatever amount was given as a security in respect of cost and expenses shall be refunded to the applicant. Say, for example, I had made that application, that cause and inspection in respect of X Limited. Once the report comes out and it says that yes, this was necessary, the affairs of the company were conducted in a fraudulent manner or in an illegal manner, unlawful manner, then if I had paid, say, 24,000 rupees as security, the 24,000 shall be refunded back to me, the applicant. Quickly, let me see if there are any doubts pertaining to these particular topics as of now. Okay, people are still replying back from Mumbai, Asansol, Delhi, Kerala, in respect of the questions asked by me. No further questions in respect of the topics being talked. Since we are at 8:27 and 3 minutes hence, we anyways have a break. So what I'll do is I'll quickly cover up section 211 of the Companies Act, that is on establishment of SFIU, that is Serious Fraud Investigation Office. Now, SFIU, you guys would have heard that over last 2 years, this particular organization has been structured and set up. Its head office is out here in Delhi. If we talk about CGO complex, one senior chartered accountant, also an ex-president, is also part of that particular office when it was first constituted. So the central government had, by its notification, then established an office as SFIU, which will investigate frauds relating to a company. Now, when what did this notification carry out? That this SFIU has been established. These will be the members of the SFIU who shall look after the final reports which come to it, or in respect of the frauds. So it will, by notification, the central government shall establish this office, and this notification shall also carry the details of the members of the SFIU. Who will be the members? There will be one director, then persons with experience and knowledge and expertise in these fields pertaining to IT, capital market, forensic audit, tax, corporate affairs, cost accounting, management accounting, financial accounting, cyber forensics, law, etc. So one director plus expertise of these, the persons with expertise of these particular fields shall form part of SFIU. Now, who shall be the director in the SFIU? Any person not below the rank of a JS to the government who has knowledge or experience in matters relating to the corporate affairs. So maybe someone from an ex-corporate affairs ministry or a current corporate affairs ministry who is a joint secretary, who's been dealing with corporate law and has an understanding of the provisions of the corporate law, can be taken up to the level of director of SFIU. Then experts or other officers or employees in the SFIU can be appointed so that the specifics of every area and aspect of a company for efficient discharge of the functions of SFIU can be carried out. Since the SFIU's major persons, for example, you cannot expect a director, you cannot expect the subject experts who've been appointed at the helm of it to go and evaluate and go through every fraud in every company. So what they will do is the experts, the officers, the employees, they would go through the fraudulent activities. They would undertake the process. They would come back with their reports. The directors and the other members who've been appointed, the other officers who've been appointed, the other experts who've been appointed, they would then go through the report of the investigation, and thereafter they would come out with the result of the investigation. Now, since it's 8:30, let's quickly take a short break and see you back at 8:36. It's 8:31 now. We resume at 8:36 and we start with section 212. during the tenure of this 5 minutes break. And if there's a question, let's first have that answer, and then after we will move forward with our subsequent topic. Which type of frauds are taken by SFIO and the inspector as the case referred by CG? Well, how many of you know about cases where money laundering is involved by companies? Okay. Let me again ask you another question. How many of you know about where money was flowed into companies and thereafter given as share premium or securities premium to other companies for the purpose of raising of their company's share capital, and this was further invested into land and building purchase or plant and machinery purchase for another company? That ways, when you have any such layering of money, financial transactions, which raise any kind of suspicion into the activities of the company, or maybe when I have my peon running as the director of a company which I have floated, and I run the show, and I run the show in a manner which does not affect me directly because I'm not a director, I'm not a member of the company, but it affects only my peon, who's become a director or member of the company on my volition, then in that case I will conduct the affairs in any manner which could be detrimental as well, and in that point of time, the SFIO could be notified through any person if they have reasons to believe, the central government has reasons to believe, it could be delegated further to the SFIO and they can take up those kind of matters. Quickly go through the layering of the share capital and securities premium. That was a classic case during the time of demonetization as well, and many such matters are taking place right now which are being taken up by the SFIO as well. And once you Google this up, you'll have better information on this, and we'll talk about it in tomorrow's class before we start for tomorrow's chapter. But this is what you do back today, that what kind of matters are being investigated. So I've given you a strong hint, layering of share capital and securities premium from one company to another, and that is how money is being transferred in the system. Very classic case around the time of demonetization, that is November 2016 onwards. I think that I have given you a very big hint. Shatrughan Kumar Singh from Delhi. Please do go through and come back with your feedback, and tomorrow we discuss on this. Now, how does this investigation exactly take place like? Well, if my central government either receives a report from a registrar, either receives report from the inspector, or it has intimation by company on passing a special resolution, if it feels in public interest, or has request from any department of central government or state governments. Of 5 cases, I'll treat registrar and inspector separate. And then it feels that it is needed, that investigation has to be assigned to the SFIO, that is the Seeded Fraud Investigation Office, then it may go ahead and cause an investigation into the affairs of the company to be caused and to be initiated by the Serious Fraud Investigation Office, or the SFIO as we call it in short. Now, once this has been received, once this request has been received, the SFIO shall designate inspectors who shall go and conduct an inquiry, who will conduct an inspection of records, who will coordinate with the other investigating agency where such investigation is pending, and transfer the relevant records and documents to the SFIO for the subsequent conduction of such investigation. Say, further, if I say earlier this investigation was pending with some court direction, through some court direction it was taking place. Subsequent it went that an SR was passed, a tribunal order is passed, Tribunal order is passed, so my CG is compelled to go ahead with an investigation. CG, central government, initiates this investigation. It feels SFIO is necessary to be implemented in this particular matter, and it should take forward the investigation. So my SFIO comes into picture. It designates inspectors. What do my inspectors feel? My inspectors feel that, okay, earlier this was looked after by this court. They had appointed somebody, some inspector, maybe Mr. X. So he goes to Mr. X, says the records now need to be transferred from yours department to SFIO. The transfer of records to SFIO shall now happen. Once this has happened, now SFIO shall conduct the investigation as per this particular chapter 14, which deals with inspection, inquiry and investigation, and it shall submit its report to central government within the time period as specified by the central government in its order. So till here we are through with 4 steps of it. 1. Ordering of investigation by central government and further transferring it to SFIO. SFIO shall designate inspector. Inspectors shall get the documents transferred to SFIO and it shall conduct the investigation and submit report to the central government. Further ahead, the investigating officer shall have the power of the inspector. So whatever the powers of the inspector was, like calling for information, calling for documents, calling for records, search and seizure, submission of report. So all the same powers shall now vest in my investigating officer also. So 217 shall now come to investigating officer. The company and its officers, they were supposed to render assistance to my inspector. So now here they will now render assistance to my investigating officer also. Now this is a cognizable offence since it's a fraud matter. So the person who's accused, he shall not be released on bail except under certain circumstances. Like one classic case, one SFIO matter. Now probably this was with SFIO and ED all together. So what happened was not ED, SFIO specifically, but ED. I'm just giving you an example what could be a certain circumstance. These two brothers, they were held behind the bars for certain action which ought for an investigation. The Enforcement Directorate was investigating this matter. They're still investigating this matter as in date as well, since I'm following this matter seriously. That's a classic case as well. Let me not share those names, but still. They were behind the bars. They said the proper mechanism was not used to get them behind the bars or to arrest them. Alright, that being a separate case, then the subsequent process was undertaken and the proper process was fulfilled and then they were again arrested. Now, when they were arrested again, they stated, my mother has cancer. I cannot stay behind the bars. I will have to take care of my mother who's an ailing woman, 80 plus, 80, 85 plus. And she's gone in deep shock and sorrow because both of us are behind the bars. Both of us have been arrested, brothers. And on those grounds, those certain circumstances, they were asked to come on parole. They were out on parole and they had to come to the police station or the Enforcement Directorate office under that jurisdiction on a regular basis, mark their attendance and go back. And only on those certain circumstances, special circumstances, they were released on parole. So that could be certain circumstances as an example. This is again current ED, SFIO and criminal court matter. Also into PMLA. Now it's again similar to what example I had given you in the earlier case where I had asked you to check up on what kind of action SFIO can undertake. I had given you a hint what you could look up today and we could discuss tomorrow. So it is on the same lines only. And once you read that particular example, we'll be able to do that. Now, someone just messaged me stating, ma'am, no PPT uploaded. Can anyone just confirm me back on chat? Are you able to view the PPT? because there is Miss Rupali from Lucknow. Rupali states no PPT uploaded. रूपाली कंफर्म बेटा, आपको पीपीटी दिख रहा है नहीं दिख रहा है? और बाकी कोई में से मेरे को बताओ कि पीपीटी दिख रहा है नहीं दिख रहा है, बिकॉज इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट आप लोग पीपीटी देखते रहो ताकि आप लोग अपने डाउट्स भी साइमल्टेनियसली पूछते रहो. अनुश्री, आई टेक अप कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस इन द मीनवाइल. तब तक आप लोग प्लीज मेरे को इन्फॉर्म करो पीपीटी का जो मेरे को अभी आया मैसेज फ्रॉम रूपाली फ्रॉम लखनऊ that she is not able to view any uploaded PPT. Others please inform whether or not it is there. Okay. Now here, when I talk about a cognizable offense, cognizable means non-bailable except under for special circumstances. So this is a cognizable offense. Person shall not be released on bail. Person accused shall not be released on bail except for certain specific circumstances. Now very quickly, can I come back to asking you guys, is the PPT visible or not? I think Miss Megha here from Delhi, she has just informed it's visible. So with that word by Miss Megha, I think Megha Goyal, she's stating that it's visible. So I'll move forward. What I would request is Rupali, आप please अपना system refresh करो. Refresh, connect back to the class, because I think there would be some network or bandwidth issue at your end that the PPT is not visible to you, because otherwise I'm getting messages and regular questions also and confirmations also from everybody that the PPT is visible. So I would request you refresh and check your bandwidth. Okay, there are two more people who just stated visible. Maybe she's telling about uploading an ECPL site. Okay, it is visible, will be available for download after some time. All right. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Now, once this guilty accused has been arrested, he has not been released on bail or bond, but under some special circumstance, he may be given an option of being released if he produces certain documents, certain evidence, certain information of that sort. Now, how will the concerned officer of SFIU arrest him? If he has a reason to believe, if he has grounds for the arrest of such accused. Now, as soon as he's arrested, a copy of order has to be forwarded to the SFIU. Thereafter, this person has to be taken within 24 hours to the judicial magistrate or the MM. Now, if I talk about this where I say, okay, he has to be taken to the judicial magistrate, I will really not stick here because there was an amendment on 15th August 2019. Now, this was prior to 15th August 2019. Subsequent to 15th of August 2019, in place of the words judicial magistrate or magistrates court, it is written as, now it shall be read as special court or judicial magistrate. So, this person who has been arrested, within 24 hours, he has to be taken to the special court. He has to be taken to the judicial magistrates court. The MM shall not have, metropolitan magistrate shall not have force here. And thereafter, an interim report and investigation report shall be submitted to the central government. So, the interim report of the inspector, the investigation report of the SFIU person shall be submitted to the central government. And then the CG may order SFIU, that is the central government may order the Serious Fraud Investigation Office to initiate any kind of prosecution against the company, officers and employees. So I have in my investigation report, in my interim report, discovered that finally there is some kind of a fraudulent activity, there is an unlawful activity which is being conducted in respect of this company or by the officers, by the employees, by the directors of the company, and for that reason prosecution needs to be initiated against such persons. Now, while I talk about this, there is a new subsection which has also been inserted. Now, what is the subsection? This subsection here talks about, now this is an amendment, guys. You need to take care. And it is applicable for your examination in November 20. Now, when there is a report, so here I am talking about report, these two reports, either of these or these two, and it states, report states, fraud has taken place, and due to such fraud, any director, KMP, other officer, of the company or any other person / entity has taken undue advantage. Well, that is also the term when we come to defining the term fraud, that there has been any undue gain, profit, advantage in respect of a particular matter or in respect of a particular transaction or that has been undertaken by the company or the officers. So any undue advantage has been taken by any of these persons, who is the director, KMP, officer, any other person or entity, whether in the form of an asset, whether in the form of cash, whether in the form of a property, or in any other manner. The central government may file an application. CG may file an application before tribunal, and when I talk about tribunal, I mean NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal. CG may file an application before the tribunal for appropriate orders with regard to disgorgement of such asset, disgorgement of such property, disgorgement of such cash, and for holding such person liable without any limitation of liability. The person shall be held, these persons, any of these who's been involved, shall be held personally liable. Quickly, if you're preparing your notes side by side, which is definitely a good habit, go ahead and note down this amendment. And in case if you want, this amendment has also been put up by our Board of Studies in the amendments which has been uploaded by them on the website of the institute. So it's easy for you to go check it up from there as well, that yes, there is an amendment in this particular topic and which is applicable for your examination. So quickly take 30 seconds or a minute's time, I'll say a minute's time for this one, and put it up in your notebooks wherever you're making your notes, and come back with any queries. There's a question from Ambika. Ambika, what is special court? Special court are courts designated for specific purposes under the Companies Act 2013. Say, for example, if I talk about where are you from? You're from Mumbai. Okay. You have a Killa court, which is somewhere near your church gate. Okay. Near, if I say this HN Reliance Foundation Hospital, a Killa court is near there. Then you have another court near Andheri Borivali also. So, just like you have those designated courts which deal on specific matters, the Companies Act, under the specific act, you can have certain courts designated to look after certain provisions, and those courts will be known as special courts. Why? Because they have been designated under the law as such to look after certain specific special matters. That would be known as designated as a special court, would be a court designated as such by the court. Now, for example, if I come back to Delhi's situation, since I'll also see a few Delhi students here, we have courts here in Tisari, we have courts here in Saket, we have courts here in Rohini, we have courts here in Dwarka, Karkaduma. Now, when 2.5 years back, there was an exercise done by the government in respect of corporate social responsibility activities of the companies. Now, what happened as a repercussion of these CSR activities being evaluated basis the documents submitted by the companies? They started identifying which companies have not undertaken the CSR compliance yet. They are not investing their money. They are not putting their money into corporate social responsibility activities for the social upliftment of the society. Now, when this started happening, those companies which were non-compliant, those companies and their officers, they were sent notices from the special court, and the special court was a court which was designated as the Dwarka court. So, if there are 10 courts, they will designate one as a special court for the purpose of Companies Act matters. So, that would be a special court in that particular case. And it is different from ROC, it is different from RD, it is different from SFIU, it is different from inspectors in that particular aspect. So it is different altogether. But it is one specific court, maybe of the magistrate. Like here earlier it was the MM, so obviously the Metropolitan Magistrates Court in Dwarka was designated for this purpose. So this special court shall have those powers as stated in the notification by the central government. Then I have another question by Gigi Jose or Gigi Jose from Kerala. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Either ways, actually. Madam, under duty of past officers of company, if fraud identified with respect to past director but director has died, who will be responsible for the action or penalty? Whether legal hires of existing directors. No, my dear, the legal hires of the existing directors shall not be held liable because they were never a part of the act. If fraud is identified with respect to past directors, but past director has died. See, one case could be all past directors have died. If that is the case, company will be held liable and company shall be penalized. If one past director has died, but the others were also of knowledge and they were a part of the board meeting when such transaction was approved, or if not passed in board meeting, they were still aware of those transactions, say in case of circular resolutions or so, or otherwise being a part of such meetings or interactions, then the other directors shall be held liable. Legal hires are never responsible for this. I'll make it very clear, legal hires shall not be held responsible. Next. Now I move to investigation into companies' affairs, and this would be, in other cases, Section 213 of the Companies Act 20.
Eva, you are on mute.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'll start with this particular section again, then, students, since I just came to know that somehow my voice was not audible. Now, here again, I'm talking about cognizance of offense by tribunal. See, earlier we had talked about a special resolution which was being filed, which was being undertaken, and thereafter it was filed with the tribunal, stating that some kind of a fraudulent activity has been undertaken in respect of the company, and therefore it requires that an investigation be caused into the affairs of the company or the transactions which are being undertaken by the company. Now, when that happens, one, how many people can really make that particular application? Not less than 100 members, or members holding not less than 1/10 of the total voting power of the company. They should come forward and file this application subsequent to a special resolution. Maybe they can authorize one person on all of their behalf, and that person can go to the NCLT and file an application for that. Or in case of a company which does not have share capital, then at least 1/5 of the persons on the company's register of members. Say if there are 10 members, at least 2 members have to go ahead and file this application. And when you're filing this application, please remember it has to be supported by the evidence. A resolution alone shall not be enough. You will have to file along with evidence stating good reasons as to why an investigation in respect of the affairs of that particular company is necessitated. You cannot just go and say that, okay, I have a special resolution, so that requires that you should cause an investigation. No, I have certain reasons subsequent to which there has been an investigation requirement which is warranted, and this is the supporting evidence which I have, basis which this resolution was passed by the members of that particular company. So then, on that application, the tribunal may come up with an order. Now, when the tribunal has to come up with an order, what does it have to be satisfied with? Will it only say, okay, I see your special resolution, I see your, and therefore I pass an order? No. You're submitting documents as well. You're supplying information as well. You're making out your case when, as members of that particular company, you're approaching the tribunal. So, the tribunal has to be satisfied in certain aspects. Now, what are those aspects? One, intent of the business. Intent is to defraud the creditors, the members, or any other person who's connected with the company. It could be the stakeholders, could be the government also. And this business is conducted for a fraudulent or an unlawful purpose or manner which is oppressive to any of the members. So here we come to section 241, 242 also, where we talk about oppression mismanagement. So in that case also, if there's oppression mismanagement, you talk about a fraud, you can refer to SFIU, and you can go on for a direction for that from the tribunal. So you're talking about an intention of the business. It is to defraud, it is conducted in a fraudulent manner, it is conducted in an unlawful manner, it is oppressive to the members of the company, or the company was formed for any fraudulent or unlawful purpose. That could be one circumstance. Second circumstance, persons concerned in the formation of the company have been connected with and taken guilty of fraud, misfeasance, or other misconduct towards the company or towards any of its members. So if I have been a person who's been in the formation of the company, maybe as a promoter, maybe as a director, maybe as a member, and I was concerned in respect of certain fraudulent activity, this company was towards some misconduct, towards the company, towards any of the members, then that could be another circumstance because of which I go to the tribunal and I state, okay, you need to have an SFIU level investigation in this company. Or the members of the company have not been given all the information with respect to the affairs, which otherwise as a member it is their right to receive from the company. Say for example, at the time of AGM, I have the right to go through and inspect the statutory records of the company, which should be open for inspection for me as a member of the company. Now, when I go and ask them for providing me such information, they do not. And what they provide to me does not match in respect of what is being furnished in the financial statements. There is some alteration, there is some difference. in respect of what was there as on financial statements date in my financial statements and what is there in the registers and records. That would give me an insight. Okay, there is some or there may be some fraudulent activity which is being conducted, or maybe related to the managerial remuneration, maybe relating to the powers that are vested in the whole-time directors of the company. So that all may happen, which may give me or instigate me to an extent to make me understand and make me reasonably believe. That reasonability to believe should be there, that there is some intent of the company, there is some intent of the officers of the company, the directors of the company, which is to undertake any kind of a fraudulent activity. So when that is there, I may again move forward and put an application ahead to the tribunal seeking an order where the matter could be referred to the Serious Fraud Investigation Office for investigation of the activities and the affairs of the company. Now, when such kind of an application is being made, it cannot be that I go to the tribunal hears me and it says I'm passing an order. That is not there. There has to be a reasonable opportunity of being heard. If you're listening to me, you have to listen to the company also, you have to listen to the directors of the company also. The tribunal will give them an opportunity that come, give us your side of the story. We will listen to both of you and then decide. So a reasonable opportunity of being heard shall be provided to the parties concerned. That okay, why an investigation by an inspector or inspectors should not be conducted in respect of your company. And if it thinks it's required, it shall cause inspectors to investigate into the affairs of the company. Now, in case if someone's found guilty, if someone has been found guilty, what, how, one, business, intention of the directors, intention of the officers of the company, in respect of the formation of the company or the management of the affairs of the company, then every officer of the company who is in default and the persons concerned in the formation of the company. So if it's the business intention, I talk about company and the officers in default of the company. If it's in respect of the formation of the company, I talk about the persons who were concerned in the formation of the company. If about management of affairs of the company, then I talk about again officers in default and officers who are managing the company to be punishable for fraud as in section 447 of the Companies Act 2013. Now let me quickly go back to my portal where I can see your queries and let me see if there's something in respect of this and then we move subsequent. And the best way for me to understand this is also that every section in Companies Act ends with the last subsection dealing with the penalty provisions, the punishment provisions, the prosecution provisions. So everything else comes in first in priority, and then they say if you do not comply with the above, if you violate the above, then this is the consequence. So the consequences here, we are ending on this particular section. Let me see, prosecution and arrest. Okay, prosecution means I initiate a legal action against you. The matter is being under trial at the court. Arrest, I arrest you and I put you behind the bars. That's how simple it is. But yes, you may have certain kind of doubts like these. Why? Because of course, into reasonable years of practice on this particular area, I have developed this understanding and you have to develop this understanding. And please remember, while you're using these terms in the examination or even practically, do not use them interchangeably. If you have to use the word prosecution, the word to be used shall be prosecution. If you have to use the word arrest, the word to be used shall be arrest only. These two terms cannot be used interchangeably. Any other doubts, guys? Alright, so far, no more doubts. Let me move forward. Hope it's all going good as of now, students. We are in section 214. We have 15 more sections to cover and around 48 to 50 minutes more. But small sections. Now we have the baby sections coming up. We really do not need to worry about, oh my god, it's got to be long. So, the very first is here now, the shorter sections, security for payment of costs and expenses of investigation. Now, the applicant had to pay, we have already seen through, that not exceeding 25,000. If I am the applicant, I have moved to the tribunal, I have sought that, okay, inspect this particular company's documents, I am supposed to give this security deposit to the company, to the tribunal. Second, if it results in prosecution, the amount shall be refunded. We've already covered this particular section. Next, who cannot be appointed as an inspector under section 215? It has to be an individual only. Inspector or inspectors have to be appointed, so only individuals can hold those offices. You cannot have a partnership form, you cannot have a proprietorship form, you cannot have a company, you cannot have an association who can be appointed as an inspector. And that is what section 215 makes it clear. So in a way, no firm, no body corporate or other association shall be appointed as inspector. Who can be appointed? Only individual. Next, investigation of ownership of company. Well. Many of you would have heard about the SBO rules also. Do not confuse the SBO rules with this. SBO rules only forms one specific part of this, where you see it in clause C of this particular section. Now, where the central government so feels that one or more inspectors are required to investigate and report on such matters related to the company, to understand who is behind the company, or maybe who is guarded against the acts committed by them, or who is the real owner of the company, who has a real intent behind floating of such company, who is financially interested in the success or failure of this particular company, who has significant influence on the company, who can influence the policy decisions of the company, who can influence the business decisions of the company. At that point of time, it can appoint one or more inspectors to investigate and report on such matters specifically. 1. Financial interest, real or apparent. 2. Business decisions, control, significant influence. 3. Beneficial interest in shares, or who is the beneficial owner of the company. Then in that case, appointment of inspectors can be done specifically to make a report on this. And further, if the tribunal so feels during the course of the proceedings that one or more inspectors are required, or more aspects need to be investigated during the course of the proceedings, then in that case they may undertake that as well, and they may direct the inspectors to undertake subsequent investigation on subsequent aspects. Next is procedure, powers, etc. of inspectors, dealing in section 217. Now, if there's a company which is under investigation, the company directly cannot appear or be represented. It cannot say, okay, I am company, I am coming before you and investigation is pending against me, that is XYZ Private Limited, and I am liable to be heard. The company cannot stand there because it is an artificial juridical person. It shall be represented by the officers of the company, it shall be represented by the employees of the company, it shall be represented by the agents of the company, and in case of a prior period investigation, by the former officers, employees, or agents of the company. I hope everybody would agree with me on that. Now, it is the responsibility of these officers, these employees of such company, to preserve and produce the documents, books, papers as demanded by the inspector. To preserve and to produce books and papers as in relation to the investigation which is in process, and to provide all assistance in connection with the investigation to the inspector. So they cannot say that, okay, you're coming to me, I will not do anything, I will not cooperate. They have to cooperate as per law. Non-cooperation is not sought after. So what they look for is, and what the law directs is, that these people shall have to coordinate. They should have to cooperate in the aspect of the complete investigation process. Now, the inspector may then require any body corporate to furnish such information to or produce such books and papers before him as he may consider necessary, and if it is necessary for the purpose of the investigation. Here, again, 180 days. One time I can seize the documents, search and seizure. I can seize the documents. Original seizure can be for 180 days time period. After that, I can again call for the books and papers if they are required by me as an inspector for the purpose of investigation for a further period of 180 days. Both of these seizure orders have to be in writing. So 180 days plus 180 days. So there was another question, I think, from one of you in respect of this 180 days thing. So a total number of seizures, how many times they can happen? Once is original, second is the subsequent seizure. Okay, in the meanwhile, I have a question here from Gigi Jose. Under section 209, search and seizure, order to get from special court. Okay. Can you give examples of special courts which may order for inspection under Companies Act? Difference between NCLT and special courts. When we talk about tribunal, we talk about NCLT. When we talk about special court, we talk about special court. When we talk about government initiating any action, that will be through special court. When we generally talk about authorities the stakeholders, for example, members, directors, officers of the company, creditors, debtors, they are having some matter, then they go to the tribunal in respect of, say, matters pertaining to insolvency and bankruptcy code, matters pertaining to uniform financial year, matters pertaining to revival of companies, of struck off names of companies, also known as restoration of name of companies. Then if you have a matter pertaining to oppression and mismanagement, so all of those matters would come within the ambit of your NCLT, that is the National Company Law Tribunal. Voluntary liquidation of companies, that is again under the purview of NCLT. Mergers, compromise arrangement, amalgamations. I think we have the next lecture pertaining to that also tomorrow. But this kind of matter again moves up to the NCLT. Why? Because we are making an application from our end. However, if the government has to initiate action against us, it will go to the special court. It would take an order from the special court and then come to us to initiate subsequent action. Officers of the company, the past officers of the company, employees of the company, past employees of the company, officers of the then directors of the company, past directors of the company. So these persons, officers, employees, past officers, past employees, agents, past agents, they can be examined on oath by the inspector who is dealing with the investigation pertaining to the company, and any other person if they have a specific central government order stating that okay, you can investigate in respect of this company with this person as well. Now, when it's an investigation under section 212, that is SFIO investigation, prior approval of director SFIO shall be sufficient in this case. So if you have the SFIO director's approval, prior approval, then prior approval of CG separately is not required. And what again are the powers as vested in the civil court, which are vested here as well? 1. Discovery and production of books of accounts, other documents, summoning and enforcing attendance, examining them on oath, inspection of books, registers and documents. Very similar, we've already dealt with it. Then again, you have the penalty provisions. Then, and of course, the fact that it has to be in writing. So any examination, any order, any documentation, any procedure that has been followed has to be in writing and signed, not just by the inspector or investigator, but also by the person who is being examined. So if I have, say for example, I have been called upon for an investigation in respect of a company, during the course of the proceedings, if I have stated something and they are noting it down, they have to make me to sign that particular document so that the fact that they can get it affirmed that this is what has been said by me. Now, in case if somebody who has been called upon to produce documents, who has been authorized by the company to produce books or papers, who was cast upon a duty to furnish information, then who was called upon by the inspector to be personally present, who signed the notes of any examination that happened by the inspector, then he shall be punishable with an imprisonment. There's an imprisonment and with a further fine also. So further fine, and further fine means there is a continuing default. Next, protection of employees during investigation. Now, if I have to, during the course of an investigation, take an action against the employee, or I have to delve into deep into the membership of the company, ownership of the company, who holds the debentures of the company, what is the affairs of the company, what are the matters relating to the company, or in respect of this, I propose to either discharge or suspend any employee of the company. I want to punish him, say by dismissing him, remove him, reduce his rank. Say, for example, someone was a senior manager, I have to reduce him to maybe an executive level. The company, why? Because he undertook an action. Maybe he went against me before the inspector, maybe against the in front of the investigator, or maybe in front of the tribunal. Then, before changing his terms of employment, before reducing his rank, before punishing him, before dismissing him, I will have to first obtain approval of the tribunal for the action proposed. And then by post, I shall send by post notice thereof in writing to the company or other body, corporate, or person concerned. Now, what is the action against the employee? If the company, other than the body, corporate, or person concerned, does not receive within 30 days the approval of the tribunal, then it may proceed to take against the employee the action proposed. So, when generally, as per law, they say 30 days time period, you need to take an action. If the 30 days are not closed and the action, there is no approval or order by the tribunal, you may go ahead and take whatever action you need to take against the employee. 30 days window is there for the company to seek approval by the tribunal on making of an application. Now, if there is an order and there's a 30 days time period and the tribunal says, no, you cannot undertake such action. The company says, I will appeal. The company can go to the appellate tribunal, that is the NCLAT, National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Now, this was NCLT, this is NCLAT, in the next 30 days of the receipt of the notice of this objection. Or, if the employee wishes to come back to the NCLAT and say, no, I am being wrongfully removed, I am being dismissed wrongfully, then it can also go to the appellate tribunal on such objection, on such order which has been received from the NCLT on an application made by the company. Now, in case if objection is not received, company can terminate. Objection is received, company or employee, as the case may be, can go to the appellate tribunal, and whatever the appellate tribunal states shall be final. Now, I come to section 219. Now, again, the bits section, but before that, let me go upon and see if there are any queries from all of you or any of you. Okay. Ma'am, upon scrutiny, after search and companies has taken copies and extract of old books at its cost. Okay, ठीक है. So search and seizure has happened. The books of the company has been taken by the company. The extracts of the books of company has been taken away by the company at cost. Okay. If found not guilty, so the company is not found guilty at the end, whether reimbursement of such cost is incurred, which is incurred by the company, will be provided. Okay, so I have Gigi Jose who says that okay, this investigation was happening. Extracts of books were the books were seized. After that, extracts of books were sought by the company, which it took at its own cost. So if 10,000 was the cost of taking copies of those books, they paid 10,000 to copies of the books and came back. Now, subsequently, at the end of the entire proceeding, it was found that the company and the officers are not guilty. Will they get a reimbursement of the cost already incurred? No. There is no such provision which calls for reimbursement of cost by the government to the company or its officers for such cost paid by it for extract of its books at its own cost. It's not there. How I wonder many companies would really want it as well. Okay, next, powers of inspector. Now, next few slides or next few segments that we would be talking right now would be pertaining to powers of inspectors. So before I move forward with that, what I would want is everybody out of you should go ahead and check if you have any prior questions pertaining to the topics that we've just completed today till now, and state those questions right away so that we move only after we've completed doubts prior to this. Let me give you a minute's breather. You can thereafter note your doubts here so that I'll first go through, get your doubts solved here, and then we'll move. Yes, please. No, not at all. I'm just giving them doubts, time for doubts, and they can clarify the same so that we move forward to the last segment. On students, I'm still on the chat portal that you have so that you can share your doubts right away. We're moving to the last segment of this particular chapter, and we should not leave any stone unturned to get our doubts resolved live right here. Alright, I gave you good 2 to 3 minutes, no doubt so far. So should I be happy that you all have concepts already clear and no doubts? But in case if you do, we're still here till the end of the class, and I'm here with you tomorrow as well and for a few more subsequent sessions. Keep your doubts intact. Get them cleared well in time. After the class today, do revise what we've done and come back with your doubts if any tomorrow, so that we complete our course well in time before the examination and we revise it well as well. Studying is equally important, and more than that, what is important is revision. Revision practicing writing answers, and getting them assessed. And then, of course, institutors mock tests as well. Attempt those. Mock test papers are released. Attempt those and practice for yourself so that you know how you're attempting those answers and how you're writing them and how they ought to be written. Chalo. No more questions after this as of now. So I will move to the last segment, starting with powers of the inspector. The first power to conduct investigation into affairs of the related companies. Now, say there is an inspector which has been appointed. He's investigating into company X Private Limited or X Limited. Now, while he's dealing with X Limited, he feels Y Limited is also involved. He feels the subsidiary company is also required to be involved. And there was one company who was dealing with the subsidiary company. There was a question. Which question was that? Let me quickly come back to that person. Quickly. Yes. This was by Shatrudhan, who had sent this company. Can the officer seize the books of accounts of the subsidiary company also if it deems fit and required? So yes, section 219 gives the power to the inspector to investigate into the affairs of the subsidiary company, the holding company also. The associate company is not being talked about here. It's only the subsidiary company of the holding company or a subsidiary company of the holding company. Let's take it like that. Segment A. How do we deal with it? Say this is X Limited. X Limited subsidiary can be talked about. X Limited's holding company can be talked about, or any other subsidiary company of the holding company which is at par with X Limited. So my inspector has the power to inspect into the affairs of these particular companies if he has reasons and if he considers it necessary for the purpose of the investigation. This was point number A. Next time, move to point number B. This is X Limited. X Limited is managed by, say, A, B, C. Now, A was the managing director here. A was also managing Y Limited at the same time when he was managing X Limited. So if my inspector has reasons to believe, then it can investigate into the affairs of Y Limited also while it is investigating into the affairs of X Limited. So one, it was holding, subsidiary or another subsidiary of my holding company. Point number A. Point number B, my directors, if they were managing any other company also as a managing director or manager at the same time, then that particular company can also be investigated upon at the same time during the investigation which are pending for my company. Then any other body corporate whose board of directors comprises nominees of the company or is accustomed to act in accordance with the directions of the company or any of its directors. So mine is X Limited, my directors are ABC. My directors ABC can direct and conduct the business of Y Limited, Z Limited and P Limited. So if directions is there, control is there, significant influence is there, then their board of directors has X Limited nominees. Then in that case, again an investigation can take place into affairs of Y Limited, Z Limited and P Limited. That is for C. Then any person who is or has at relevant time been the company's managing director, manager or employee. So that's something that we've earlier dealt with as well. So these three cases, you can probably make these small charts and then I move to the next slide. So when and which other organization can be dealt with? My subsidiary, my holding, another subsidiary of my holding company. Second, my managing director or my manager was also the managing director or manager of another company at the same time or at the relevant time. Third, my directors are nominees on the board of another companies, or my directors have the power to give directions, instructions, or can influence the directors or control the directors of another company. So those companies whose directors can be influenced or whose business can be influenced, those companies can also be investigated upon. There is a message which comes from Mr. X from Lucknow. Please share your doubt. I would like you to rephrase it. Let me just try and read this again. Maybe Mr. X has a doubt which is not clear and he wants to ask something. There was another Mr. X earlier from Lucknow. This Mr. X comes from Delhi. So Mr. X, I want your name as well. Because otherwise we have a lot of companies running in your name in our examples. So rather not, let's get you in that particular ambit of those particular companies. Let's have your name and your doubt as well. Next, powers of inspector. Seizure of documents by the inspector, which is section 220 of the Companies Act. Now, during the course of the investigation, if I as an investigator, I as an inspector feel that there are certain documents which can be destroyed, torn, defaced, mutilated, altered or changed, they can be hidden, they can be secreted, they can be parted away with, then I as an inspector, I can enter the place where such books of accounts are kept. I can enter the place where such books and papers are kept. I can seize the books and papers after allowing the company to take copies of or extracts at their cost. And just like there was an earlier question from Gigi, the company will not be reimbursed of such cost if the investigation does not result in a fruitful result. That is, it in the end states that the person is not guilty. If it so says, then in the end the cost shall not be reimbursed back. Ambika from Mumbai, ma'am, if bank or public financial institution has been appointed nominee director of company in board of directors of company, can investigation be extended to it? No. That's for nominee director, my dear. See, that also depends on situations, I would say. For example, if you talk about, say, Gitanjali Jewels, what happened in Nirav Modi's case, I'm not sure if PNB had a nominee on their board for the financial assistance extended, but had it been, let's make it as an example, had there been a situation where PNB had a nominee on that board, and since PNB later was found as a connection and the loans were like arbitrarily given to this particular company, so at that point of time, investigation could have been initiated as a nominee director if they would have had, but that would not have been on nominee director, that would have been on the organization. If there would have been found such a connect. Had it been through the nominee director, then the nominee director would also have been under question. So let me limit your question with an example being created in a situation which has been there. So to an extent, there was one situation pertaining to Gitanjali jewels, gems and jewels. But I'm extending it to the fact that whether or not, since I do not remember that point, whether or not there was a nominee director or not, so I would, for the purpose of your question, for the sake of your question, just extend it to that extent. Whether SFIO can start investigation on suo motu. No, it has to on receipt of an application or receipt on direction. Let me come back to that particular slide for you. So it has to receive some documentation, some application, some reference document which states that there is some kind of any activity which is being conducted by the company which is detrimental to the interest, which is fraudulent, which is unlawful, and then it can order any investigation. So here also we see there is first report of registrar or inspector, intimation of SR by the company, public interest, or request from any department that SFIO can initiate investigation. Next. Seizure of books and papers. We've already dealt with, okay. Time period for keeping these books and papers, 180 days. Plus 180 days extendable after returning. So first 180 days, then you have to return the books. If you again require it as an inspector, you will again have to seek it, but for 180 days only. No further extension is being talked about in law, so we would rather not contemplate on that. Extracts can be taken. Identification marks can be placed on such books of accounts as considered necessary by the inspector or investigator. Section 221, freezing of assets of company on inquiry and investigation. So, during the course of inquiry and investigation, the tribunal is of the view that there is, maybe when a complaint is made by, say, a creditor who's having a 1 lakh or more amount, and there is a reasonable amount ground to believe by the tribunal that any kind of funds can be disposed of, any kinds of funds can be misappropriated, any assets can be misappropriated or parted away or alienated, or the shareholders or creditors in public interest feel that there should be such action, then the tribunal, on being satisfied, it can direct that the transfer, removal, or disposal of any asset of the company shall not take place during such period, not exceeding 3 years, or it may place certain conditions and restrictions in respect of such assets or their transfer, removal, disposal. So, in short, again, there is a pending inquiry or investigation. The tribunal feels on the application being made that the company may remove, transfer, or dispose of any funds, assets, or properties. Then in that case, it can order for a maximum period of 3 years, 2 of the things. 1, there shall be no transfer, removal, or disposal of assets. Or it may impose certain conditions or restrictions in respect of transfer, removal, or disposal of the funds or assets of the company. Now, I'm simultaneously going through the question portal also, so that your questions are answered. Next, powers of the inspector, imposition of restriction upon securities. Now, if during the course of investigation, my authority realizes, or my tribunal is aware of certain facts, is of the opinion that certain securities which have been issued by the company or which are in the process of issuance by the company has had some kind of other effect, or some other beneficial owner exists who is behind the window and operating and running the show, then in that case, the tribunal can impose restrictions upon such securities, or in respect of powers vested with such securities, could be voting rights, could be transferability rights, could be any other rights connected with such securities. And this, again, if there are restrictions, these restrictions again shall not be for a period not exceeding 3 years. So maximum period of restrictions could be only 3 years. Next, inspector's report, section 223. Now, when my inspector is conducting this particular inspection, we talked about an interim report, we talked about a final report. On the basis of the report, there is an investigation which is now being undertaken by the SFIO. So, one interim report shall go to the central government, and on the conclusion of the investigation, a final report shall go. So, interim report if so directed, and subsequently a final report to the central government. This report and any report shall be in writing or shall be printed. This shall be as per the direction of the central government. The central government, if it says, okay, give it to me in writing, give it to me in writing. Print and give, print and give. A copy of the above report may be obtained by the members or creditors or any other person whose interest is likely to be affected. So, if I am a director of the company, my interest is likely to get affected, I can obtain a copy of the report. If I am an officer of the company or during the caption time period in respect of which the investigation is being undertaken, then in that case, I think my interest is likely to get affected, then I can make an application to obtain a copy of the said report to understand that what has been reported in that particular report, and it's my right because I am interested in that particular matter directly. Then, if I am the inspector, I shall have to put the seal of the company whose affairs have been investigated. For example, X Limited's affairs have been investigated. X Limited's seal has to be put up on that particular report. Then a public officer who has the custody of the report, a certificate from that public officer has to be taken in respect of that particular report. And this report by the inspector, by the investigator, shall be admissible in any kind of proceedings. Why? Because it is upon government initiation by the action, and it is by a government inspector for the purpose of investigation of a company, and therefore it is admissible in legal proceedings as a document. Now, what are the actions to be taken in pursuance of inspector's report? Now, if there is a person who is criminally liable, prosecution of such person for the offense, and the officers of the company, they shall have to give all necessary assistance in respect of or in connection with such prosecution. Second, if any company or other body corporate is liable to be wound up under IBC, then in that case, or they shall be caused to be presented by the tribunal, one, for any action that the tribunal may deem fit. For example, if there's an application under section 241, operation mismanagement, if there is an application for winding up of the company, and if that is pending, so unless and until it is expedient, if there is circumstances which is warranted, this company shall not be wound up. The central government may also play a part in this particular winding up or operation mismanagement matter. If from this particular report it appears to the central government that there should be recovery of damages in respect of any fraud. So, a fraud has occurred, it has caused an undue loss to any other person, and that damage needs to be recovered, then the tribunal can order that. It talks about recovery of any property is required which has been misapplied or wrongfully retained. Then an order to that effect can also be obtained from the court. Central government may itself bring up proceedings for winding up of the company. Suo motu application for winding up by the central government in respect of the company, in respect of which investigation is being carried out. Then, no limitation of liability of the director, KMP, officer, or any other person who has derived any undue advantage or benefit in respect of the fraudulent activity. Now, this could be they've obtained an asset, this could be they've misappropriated cash, this could be they have obtained some property of the company, either ways. So, if they've obtained any kind of a benefit, then that benefit has to be, or that loss to the company has to be made good by such person without any limitation of liability. Expenses of investigation, section 225. So if this shall be reimbursed, if there is any expenses of inspection, expenses of investigation, who has to be reimbursed? Now there's a list. 1. Any person who is convicted on a prosecution which is instituted or is ordered to pay damages to the extent that he may in the proceedings be ordered, then he will have to pay such damages. Second, any company or body corporate in whose name proceedings are brought to the amount of property which has been recovered. Say, for example, any property which was alienated and it has been subsequently recovered by it as a result. Then, third, unless as a result of the investigation, a prosecution is instituted. If a prosecution is not instituted, then to such persons or the applicant and the applicant of the company. If some prosecution is in there, so there was this 25,000 up to 25,000 cost which had to be paid by the applicant. If prosecution takes place, this 25,000 shall be refunded, or any amount for which a company or body corporate is liable shall be a first charge on the sums or the property which is recovered. Next, voluntary winding up of a company, etc., not to stop investigation. So, if there is an operation mismanagement petition before NCLT, if there is a special resolution for voluntary winding up passed by the company, if there is any other proceeding of winding up pending before the tribunal, that does not mean that inspection investigation proceedings cannot happen because the company is under management oppression, if the company is being in the process of winding up. No, that is a separate issue. Investigation can continue against this particular company, and this does not mean also that since the company is under winding up, since the company is already talking about a mismanagement oppression in that particular company is being talked about, that means the directors shall not have a liability. No. The directors or the employees of the company shall have to participate in the proceedings before the inspector, and they shall be liable for any result of the finding by the inspector in respect of the investigation being carried out pertaining to that particular company. Section 227, legal advisors and bankers not to disclose certain information. Now, if there is a legal advisor to the bank, to that particular company, nothing in this particular segment or chapter which pertains to inquiry, inspection, investigation, or inspection, inquiry, investigation shall require disclosure to the tribunal, shall require disclosure to the central government, shall require disclosure to the registrar or to the inspector by a legal advisor of any communication which has been made to him in that capacity. So if my legal advisor has been given some information by me, he cannot disclose to any of them except as respects the name and address. You can only give the name and address of that particular client and nothing else. So if that particular authority is coming to me, I am the legal advisor, I can only say, okay, this is my client you want, this is the name, this is the address, go. I will not be giving any other information. Or if I am the banker and they come to me, I can only give the details pertaining to the company and nothing more until unless compelled by an order. Then investigation, etc. of foreign companies So whatever is applicable here to a resident domestic company shall be equally applicable, mutatis mutandis, same to same, as it is to the extent applicable to foreign companies also in respect of inspection, inquiry and investigation in respect of their affairs of business. Penalty for furnishing false statement, mutilation, destruction of documents. This is also the last section of this particular chapter of inspection, inquiry, investigation. So in case if any person is required or called to provide an explanation, if he's called for certain information, if he's called for certain production of documents or to make a statement, and he's under such investigation, if he destroys any documentation, if he removes any documentation, if he tampers with any documentation, if he alters any documentation, if he conceals any documents or details or mutilates it, anything pertaining to property, the assets or the affairs of the company, if he makes a false entry in the documents concerned, if he provides an explanation which is either false or which he knows that it is false, then he shall be punished as if it was a fraud, as in section 447 of the Companies Act 2013. With that, we end on today's session from my side. Let me quickly see that in case if there are any notes, doubts from your end. You're welcome, Gigi. Thank you that the PPT is helping to prepare the notes. And of course, replies would come for all of you instantaneously for your doubts, because that is also what is the intent of the entire sessions being conducted by the Institute, to solve your queries as and when they arise, and be your guides and be your mentors for preparing this particular subject from the side of the Institute. So I think all of you, please go through the subject today, go through this particular chapter today, and tomorrow, before we start with the next chapter, I would be more than willing to take any doubts which are emanated out of today's session, and subsequently we'll start with the next chapter as per the schedule. With that, since no more doubts are there, I will close down on this session right now at 10 a.m. Thank you. Have a good day. Study well. Prepare hard. Thanks.